All right.
Okay, I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order, December 29th, 2020 meeting of the SAU41 Governing Board. To start, we'll go around and ask the members to state that your reason for participating electronically, that you are alone, and that you are able to hear the proceedings. So I'll go ahead and start, and then I'll call on everybody from there in alphabetical order so that we get a better idea of the order that we'll be in. So I'm Erin Saris. I am participating electronically from home due to COVID-19. I am alone in the room that I'm in, and I'm able to hear the proceedings. So Brooke?
Thank you, Erin. Brooke Arthur, I'm participating electronically from home. Attendance in person is not reasonably practical due to COVID-19. I'm alone in the room and I can hear the proceedings.
Okay, Liz?
I can find the unmute button. Elizabeth Brown, I am participating at home due to COVID restrictions, and I am in a room alone and I can reasonably hear the proceedings.
Okay, Tammy.
You're on mute, Tammy.
Beg your pardon, all. Tammy Freed, I am participating digitally because of the COVID restrictions. I am alone in the room and I can hear all the proceedings.
Ken?
Hi, Ken Haig. I'm alone in the room. I can hear the proceedings, and I'm alone due to COVID-19. Thanks.
Becky?
Hi, I'm Becky Howie. I am participating remotely because of COVID-19, and I am alone in the room and can hear the proceedings.
Thank you. Karen?
Karen Ju, I am participating remotely due to COVID-19 restrictions. I am alone in the room and I can hear the proceedings.
Amy?
Amy Kellner, I'm participating remotely because of COVID-19 restrictions. I'm alone in the room and I can hear the proceedings.
Kate?
Hi, Kate Stoll. I am participating electronically due to COVID. I can hear the proceedings and I am alone in the room.
Sorry, maybe not totally alphabetical. It's what Dawn had in the outline. Sorry to throw you for a loop. Rob?
Robert Mann, I'm participating remotely due to COVID restrictions. I am in my home office here alone, listening to the proceedings.
Allison? Oh, is Allison not here yet?
No.
Okay. Carol?
Hi, this is Carol Roy. I'm participating electronically from home. Due to COVID-19, I'm alone in the room and I can reasonably hear the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom?
This is Tom Solon. I am at home, alone in the room. I am here because of COVID restrictions and I can hear the meeting.
Do we have Cindy here yet?
Cindy's on her way in right now.
Oh, great. So go ahead to Krista and then Cindy.
Krista Whalen, and I am at home due to COVID restrictions, and I am alone in the room and can hear the proceedings.
Great. Cindy?
I am Cindy Van Conet, and I am home alone, and I can hear the proceedings.
Great. And Allison Williams.
I think Beth Williams.
I'm so sorry, Beth Williams.
Okay. That's okay, Beth Williams. I am home participating due to the COVID-19 restrictions. I'm alone in the room and I can hear the proceedings fine.
Okay. I think we got everybody. Did anybody get missed that's here? Okay. Is there anyone that's coming late that I missed? Just so I know and can, no, we're good. Okay. Would anyone like to volunteer to be the process observer for this meeting? My thought on the process is it goes pretty quick when it's on Zoom, but if someone would like to brave the task, I'd appreciate it. Or should I appoint someone?
I'll try it. Erin.
Oh, thanks, Krista. You're always such a good sport. I was gonna appoint Ken, so you can thank Krista, Ken.
I almost volunteered. Thank you.
Do we have any agenda adjustments?
I have one.
Okay.
We're going to be discussing the conflict of interest memo tonight. And I'd just like to add a deliberative item, which would just simply authorize Erin to sign the memo by the SAU board, just acknowledging that we're aware of the conflict. We're not saying that we're going to enter a lease. We're not saying anything like that. But we just would need some sort of vote to allow Erin to sign that. So I'd like to just add a deliberative item for that.
And I would like to also submit an agenda adjustment. I am delivering the SAU FY22 budget proposal this evening, and I feel that it would be better serve the public if public comment came after the presentation, so that the public has all of the most current details that we have to offer. And perhaps we'll be able to answer many questions through that presentation and not, force people to talk against things that have already got answers. So I'd like to propose that we put public comment after the budget presentation.
That works. Do we vote on agenda adjustments or?
Dawn
No.
would prefer it that way.
Okay. So I guess I need a motion to approve of the two proposed agenda adjustments.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Oops. Let's go ahead and vote. Erin, aye. Brooke?
Brooke Arthur, aye.
Liz?
Liz, aye.
Tammy?
Tammy Freed, aye.
Ken?
Ken, aye.
Becky?
Aye.
Karen?
Karen, aye.
Amy?
Amy, aye.
Kate?
Kate, aye.
Rob?
Rob, aye.
Allison? I'm sorry, Carol?
Carol, aye.
Tom?
Tom Solon, aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Cindy, aye.
Krista?
Krista, aye.
Beth?
Beth, aye.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So next we'll go ahead and move on to the approval of minutes, and then we'll head right into the public hearing since with the in light of the agenda adjustments. So we're looking to approve the minutes from the governing board meeting of October 15th, 2020. Members Arthur Brown, and Marsana were absent, so they'll be abstaining from this vote. The following amendments were offered. Page 6, line 26, replace have with having. Page 11, line 45, replace second reading with first reading. Page 12, lines 15 to 16 should state, accept the second reading, waive the third. So I'm looking for a motion to approve as amended.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. Erin, aye. Brooke?
Abstain?
Liz?
Abstain.
Tammy?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Becky?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Rob?
Rob, aye.
Carol?
Carol, aye.
Tom?
Tom Solon, aye.
Cindy?
I'm abstaining. I wasn't there, and I've spoken with Dawn about that, just so that she knew.
Okay. Krista?
Krista, aye.
Beth?
Beth, aye.
Okay, thank you. That passes. So let's see. Now, I need a motion to go into the public hearing. So I need a motion to recess until the conclusion of the public hearing on the unreserved fund balance and the proposed FY22 operating budget.
So moved.
Second.
Okey doke. Erin, aye. Brooke,
Brooke, aye.
Liz,
Liz, aye.
Tammy,
Tammy, aye.
Ken,
Aye.
Becky,
Aye.
Karen,
Karen, I.
Amy,
Amy, I.
Kate,
Kate, aye.
Rob,
Sorry, Rob, aye.
Carol,
Carol, aye.
Tom.
Tom Sullivan, aye.
Oh, I lost my track. Where am I here? Oh, here we go. Cindy,
Cindy, I.
Krista,
Krista, I.
and Beth.
Beth, aye.
Okay. Okay, so we are now we're now in the public hearing. Let me just get my bearings here with the meeting outline so I'm in the right place. So this is the public hearing for the unassigned fund balance. To provide an update and obtain public input on the potential increased use of the unassigned fund balance.
Is Andy, is this something that you had, I'm sorry, this is unclear, but Andy, had you expected me to build that into as part of the presentation of the budget also?
No, Tammy,
Okay.
no. In your board packet for the board members, this is our annual update on the unassigned fund balance. You'll see the total balance available to you as a board when Tammy does the presentation. This is to conclude the FY21 balance and to give the board an update. We had decided to always do a public hearing at this time of year so that community members would know if the board had used the unassigned fund balance during the spring when they choose to do merit increases and things of that nature. So this year the board had approved $6,854 of the unassigned fund balance to meet those raises and merit awards that they had put forth in the spring. As we go through Tammy's presentation on the budget, you'll see that we continue to try to maintain a 7 to 10% balance in that unassigned fund balance. And when we do use it, we try to use it for one-time expenses rather than to simply offset the budget. Happily take any questions anybody may have on this, but this is really just a housekeeping piece. Seeing nothing, with the chair's permission, I would ask Bob if he could pull up the screen share document so that Tammy will be able to go through the presentation on the SAU budget.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. As Andy mentioned, we are entering the public hearing for the FY22 SAU41 budget. The fiscal year begins July 1 of 2021. Next slide, please. The SAU41 Budget Subcommittee is made up of members of the 3 school districts, the SAU Governing Board, and the Finance or Budget Committee of both the 2 towns as well as the co-op itself. So as you see from the SAU, that includes Andy Corey, Superintendent, Gina Bergskog, Assistant Superintendent, Kelly Seeley, Business Administrator, and Linda Sherwood, Senior Assistant Business Administrator, who can't be with us tonight, but who has done just literally heroic work putting this together every year. I am the elected treasurer of the SAU Governing Board. I am not the treasurer of the SAU41 itself. That is an appointed position with a stipend. I'm merely an officer of the board for this year. Brookline Allison Marsano is from the school board, and Dennis Como, who I had the pleasure to meet and work with on this committee. He's a very sharp mind and appreciated his input. Hollis, Amy Kellner from our school board in Hollis, and Michael Harris, who has a long history on the Hollis Budget Committee as well as the Hollis School District, so he's very familiar with all of these needs and dynamics. And from the co-op, Beth Williams and Darlene Mann. And that rounds out our our committee. We had a couple of meetings, first to introduce the draft budget and then to look at it again after the SAU Governing Board had a chance to make its comments on it. And we're presenting to you tonight the recommendations of the subcommittee. This is a new slide for this deck, and I hope it becomes a little bit more elaborate as the years go on. This is what I chose to call the SAU41 snapshot. It shows you a little something about, oh, all the numbers are gone. I apologize. This slide is supposed to have numbers on it, and I will read them to you because I don't see them on my screen. But
Tammy, we're only seeing the agenda slide right now.
oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I'm going to stick to what you're doing because I had to move to my own screen. Sorry, this is the agenda slide, so I beg your pardon. The SAU41 snapshot is a slide that I'll show you in a minute. And then, as you see, we will look at budget comparisons to last year. Main budget drivers, there are 4 significant budget drivers of changes in this in the FY22 budget. We have budget components to give you a different perspective on the main pillars of this budget, breakdown by category, unassigned fund balance, as Andy has just mentioned, and we'll show you some pictures of that, revenue, which is minuscule to SAUs, and budget apportionment by district, which is distributed by state formulas. And then we'll show you a sample warrant article. It's not the actual warrant article, obviously, because the boards have not voted on that yet. And then we'll take questions and answers. This is the snapshot I was telling you about because I'm excited about it. So I've always felt as a longtime member of this board that we don't do enough to inform the public as to what the structure of this SAU does. What do you actually do in that building all day? The SAU41 is, if you looked at it as a corporation, is a $51 million operation. You can see from the 4 different budgets that our staff has to prepare every year. The co-op is about half of that, and Hollis, Brookline, and the SAU itself take up about half of the rest of it. It's a very large operation. We are a people services organization. We serve 2,410 students. We also serve their families. The number of staff is 444. I'm going to jump. The number of coaching positions is 100. And the number of active substitutes are 90. If you do the math, that is 400, 500, 634 individuals who are employed by the district. I moved over the number of volunteers. You'll see that in the middle there, 478. These aren't people who just sign up and show up. These are people who have to be processed by the SAU through background checks, through registration of their identification, through their safety training that we have to do online, and the certification of that. It is another nearly 500 individuals who are managed by the SAU. The last bullet item on this slide says number of invoices processed annually, about 10,000. This slide doesn't tell you how many accounts payable are processed for payroll. It doesn't tell you how much tax work is done, for example, all the withholdings, et cetera. This is a tip of the iceberg of what our staff does day in and day out. Thank you. Next slide. FY22 budget comparisons. If you look in the blue blocks there, FY21 adopted budget. That's the number we adopted this past March for the current year, $1,813,954. This was voted on by the voting public in both towns across all 3 school districts. The FY22 proposed budget that we're addressing tonight is $1,957,257. The difference between the two is $143,303, which is a 7.9% increase this year, the coming year over the current year. In the purple blocks, you see comparison to adjusted budget. The FY22 proposed budget, as we just said, is $1,957,000. The FY22 adjusted budget would be $1,922,864. That's a $34,393 difference between, of the proposed budget over the adjusted budget, which is a 6% difference. The adjusted budget by RSA is a number that starts with the figure approved this past March, that 1.8 million you see above, and then added to it are increases in debt service contracts and other recurring obligations that have been incurred or mandated, and minus any one-time expenditures. Next slide. These are the 4 budget drivers I mentioned earlier that are included on the agenda. The primary budget driver this year is an increase in salaries. I'd like to break that down for you so you understand where all these, what the components are of this increase. 2 assistant superintendents are on our staff. They do an incredible amount of work of intense value. And we had talked about, as an SAU governing board, perhaps decreasing their contractually obligated increases to 2%. We looked at those numbers, but we also looked at the comparative salaries of their positions across the state. The Department of Education maintains that list of all the superintendents, assistant superintendents, business administrators, and building principals salaries across the entire state. We are not paying the average or above average rate. There are building principals in our nearby communities who are being paid more than our assistant superintendents. And we decided as a committee, after much discussion and analysis, that these 2 assistant superintendent positions should not lose their parity with the equivalent positions across the state. There are not as many qualified candidates as one would like to think, and we must maintain competitive to keep our staff as sharp as possible. For the other employees in the district, we've set aside a 2% increase. Oh, I'm sorry, let me revisit the 2 assistant superintendents. One last point that's important. Our superintendent and assistant superintendent contracts stipulate that there will be an increase within the range of 2 to 4%. That range gives the board and the superintendent a chance to adjust the recommended increases, but an increase is required of a minimum of 2%. So again, the rest of the SAU staff, we are setting aside a 2% increase, and then you see a $16,000 board approved salary adjustments. We've had 2 staff members who have developed new qualifications for promotions, and their performance has qualified them also for promotions, and with those promotions came a commensurate increase in their salaries. In addition, as you all know, we have a new facilities director. His current contract, although it's on a 12-month rate, only covers the 10 months of his employment in the current fiscal year. But as of July 1, he will start working a full 12 months of a full year contract at the same rate with a slight increase. And so that's what makes up the $16,000. Those 3 bullet items together comprise the $67,839. The second budget driver row there, benefits New Hampshire retirement. This year, the New Hampshire retirement system, which covers all public employees from police to fire to teachers and many other types of employees who are public employees, has seen a very significant increase. So the total to our SAU is $56,318. You can see in the notes on the right that one element is the New Hampshire retirement system teacher rate, which is its own rate, and there's a range there of 17.8 to 21.2%, depending on the individual's qualifications for retirement. And then the second bullet item, New Hampshire retirement system employee rate, again, a different category for different types of employees than teachers, 11.17 to 14.06% increase, again, depending on those individuals' qualifications for retirement. And the total of that increase is $56,318. The third row shows the benefits changes for our medical insurance or health insurance rates. In the fall of every year, the insurance industry issues a heads up. They call it GMR, Guaranteed Maximum Rate. It's not the actual rate, it's the most that they will be raising it come spring when they set the rate in stone for the year. The guaranteed maximum rate a few years ago was -1%. Last year, I believe it was 4%, 4.2. This year, it's 10.9% increase. This, like the retirement system increases, are outside of the control or influence of anyone in the district or any voters in Hollis and Brookline. These are large structural costs that we can't refuse or reduce. The fourth item in the budget drivers is benefits taxes. This is simply the withholdings, et cetera, that are normal to employees, withholding from paychecks. And it was felt that that was a larger number than has been. And so we wanted to point out that it just corresponds to these changes in salary that you see above. The slides is the FY22 budget components. The pie chart helps us get perspective over the fact that we are a labor-intensive service organization. Of the overall budget, $1,957,257 that is proposed for FY22. $1,246,750 is accounted for by salaries, and that's 64% of the overall SAU budget. Benefits, $538,641, 27%, a little over a quarter of the annual budget. And other is $171,866, which is 9%, and that's our copiers and our energy bills, et cetera. You'll see in the small box in the upper right corner, salaries and benefits make up 92% of the total budget. We are a labor-intensive service organization. Budget categories take a different look at this budget. Benefits, FY21, our total benefits were $450,304. That's our current year. The proposed budget, $538,641, an increase of $88,337. Again, these benefits are the retirement system and the medical insurance. These are beyond our control. Wages. This current year, $1,185,765. FY22 proposed is $1,246,750. This is the $60,985 number you saw before. Operations and maintenance. This current year, $54,220. Proposed budget, $55,808, a $1,588 increase. Services, $31,600. For the current year, proposed year, $32,650, a $1,050 increase. Services are things like snow removal, et cetera. The snow removal is incredibly expensive. Expendables, copier, ink, et cetera, paper, $14,400 in the current year. FY22 proposed budget, $14,600, an increase of only $200. Travel. Current year is $17,000. The FY22 proposed travel budget is $16,550, a reduction of $450. I think if you want to understand this line item better, think about how much these staff members drive all around our own district, let alone around the state for the multiple kinds of meetings they have to attend. This and there is some out-of-state travel, although obviously this year it's curtailed to an extent. Equipment and software, $13,350 for the current year, $11,450 in the FY22 proposed budget, a $1,900 decrease, decrease. You see it in red there on the slide. Merit increase. This is a pool of funds that gives the superintendent some room to recommend increases or merit for individuals based on his assessment of their performance, et cetera. This current year, the merit pool is $22,795. FY22 proposed budget is $20,108. It's a reduction of $2,687. That was a painful cut, but we obviously had to attempt to make some adjustments based on the increase that we were hit with. And finally, in the last item, professional development. A great deal of professional development is mandated. It's not elective, and some of it is elective based on contractual obligations. FY21 current year, the budget is $24,520. FY22 proposed $20,700, a reduction of $3,820. So again, the total budget for our current year, $1,813,954. The FY22 budget proposed total, again, $1,957,257 with a change, an increase total of $143,303. Again, 7.9% increase. And these numbers and the totals match what you've seen in the previous slides and what you'll see in subsequent slides. We're at the unassigned fund balance slide, which Andy described in the unassigned fund balance portion of the public hearing. If you'll look please at the first line, FY21 beginning balance. July 1, 2020 is the first day of the current fiscal year, and we began the year with $167,064. In March, the approved expenditure from that fund balance was $26,854, and that is the current year expenditure that's being planned. Projected ending balance, based on the math there, for June 30th of the coming year, which would be the end of this fiscal year, is $140,210. The next line shows you our projected expenditures from this fund balance for the FY22 fiscal year, and that number is 0. It's been assessed that the building is in good shape, et cetera, and that we will not have any extensive one-time expenditures needed from this fund balance. And so we project that the ending fund balance for June 30, 2022, which would be the last day of the FY22 fiscal year, is $140,210, just as it began. In the gray block below, you can see historical target unassigned fund balance, UFB, range is 7 to 10%. This is a reflection of how similar a kind of agency an SAU is to a town. Towns are also given that sort of guidance by the state. Try to stay within the 7 to 10% unassigned fund balance as a cushion against surprises. SAUs turn out to be their own type of agency. We are neither a town nor are we a school district. The way the state has set up SAUs, school administrative units, is unique. And yet the way we are, the definition of what an SAU is, doesn't really qualify us for grants or other sources of revenue of any significance. So the unassigned fund balance takes on significant importance as a contingency source in the event of something, very untoward and unexpected. So as you see from the bar below that white title, the minimum of that 7 to 10% based on this, the FY22 projected budget, the minimum of 7% would be $137,008. If we were trying to retain 10%, that maximum number would be $195,726. The expenditures from this current fiscal year, the balance, the 0 planned expenditures during the FY22 year, leaves us at $140,210, which is 7.2% of the proposed FY22 budget. We are at the lowest possible end of the range that's recommended for fiscal prudence. Revenues, again, an SAU is very hard pressed to generate revenues. I've asked about this $4,000 grants and direct costs. We're given a little pittance out of the grants that the school districts earn for running the programs that the school districts are qualified when they get grants and such. And from those sources, we project a $4,000 revenue source for FY22. Apportionment. Again, I'm going to start with the very bottom most of this slide. Distribution is determined by a calculation using equalized valuation as provided by the state and the average daily membership of students. These numbers are not generated by the SAU. They are generated based on a state formula. So if you look at the 2020-21 column, you see expenses, as we've said before, $1,813,954. That year we had revenues of $30,854. Total appropriation, because we subtract revenues from expenses, total appropriation that year, $1,783,100. The parallel for the proposed FY22 budget is a proposed expenditures of $1,957,257, revenues $4,000. So the total appropriation we would be seeking is $1,953,257. Below that are how this breaks out into the school districts of towns. So for Brookline, I'm just going to stay with this year, this proposed year, but you can see the distinctions. This current year, $319,460, proposed FY22, $361,236. The proposed amount would have Brookline paying 19% of the total SAU budget, not a 19% increase. Sometimes that column confuses people. It's not an increase, it's the total percentage. Hollis is paying this year $553,385. Proposed budget, Hollis would pay $592,000. So that would constitute 30% of the overall SAU budget. Co-op, $910,255 for the current year, $997,899 for the proposed FY22 year, and that's 51% of the total SAU budget. So as you see from the total appropriations, the FY22 total appropriation does line up to $1,953,257, which is 100% of the appropriation. This is a sample of the warrant article. Again, warrant articles are not issued at this date. School boards have to ratify them, et cetera. But this is just a sample to show you what to expect as we see every year. Each school district would have this article with its own name and its own numbers in the lines where you see a blank line or X's. Shall the voters of the Brookline School District adopt a school administrative unit budget of $1,953,257, which we just saw from the previous slide, for the forthcoming fiscal year, in which, again, there's going to be a number there based on the final number that the board places as the budget that would then be filled in for Brookline for this slide, is assigned to the school budget of the school district. This year's adjusted budget is $1,918,864, with, again, X percentage assigned to the school budget of the school district. Will be adopted if the article does not receive a majority vote of all the school district voters voting in this school administrative unit. And then we will have the language finalized. The budget committee does or does not recommend, the school board does or does not recommend, as is relevant to each of our school districts. Keeping in mind that all 3 district voters have to vote on this warrant article before it's known whether that budget passes or not. It's an up or down vote. So if the overall SAU voting block votes no against the main budget of the proposed budget of $1,953,000, then the default becomes the SAU budget. It's $1,918,000. And thank you for allowing us to present this to you. Any questions or comments?
Thanks, Tammy. That was great. I just want to commend you guys. That's
well, I really need to lay in again and thank Linda Sherwood.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
There was clearly a lot of work put into that, and I appreciate it. I'm going to open the floor for public comment. I'm going to ask for anyone who would like to speak in favor, and then anyone who would like to speak in opposition. And I'll do that 2 times for each. So first, is there anyone who has any questions for Tammy from the board? Okay, so is there any public testimony in favor? Would anybody like to speak in opposition to this budget?
Yes, Eric Power would like to.
Okay, I'll let you go. You can go ahead and start now, Eric.
Yes, thank you for your time and for listening. I tried to send some notes to all of the SAU board members. I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. I looked at the SAU office, both long-term and short-term, and saw that the SAU over the past 14 years since FY07, it has grown quite a bit. We've seen the student population go down about 15%, but we've seen the office headcount go up 78%. We went from 9 employees to 16, and we now have 4 employees making over $100,000 versus 1. We have 3 superintendents instead of 1. And some, just to compare to inflation by the CPIU, inflation's been 23% during that time. At the same time, the SAU budget's been up 68%. And a metric I like to look at is that you look at the SAU cost per student. So you take the SAU budget and divide it by all the students K through 12 in Hollis, Brookline, and the co-op. And that in 2007, we had $391 we were spending per student. This past year, we've almost doubled that number. We're up to $766 per student. And with this budget increase for next year, it would be $813. And that would be more than doubling where we were, 15 years ago. So
I can respond to those points, Eric, if you're, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Chairman Saras, did you want any responses?
Yeah, no, actually, just for accuracy purposes, Tammy, if you would respond to those points, since you just spoke to them, that would be helpful.
Is it appropriate for me to do so during the public comment? And Eric Power, I apologize for if I've interrupted the proper format of the public hearing. I get excited.
My understanding is if it's just to correct, some data, I think it's okay to provide that, Tammy, and then Eric can definitely continue.
Eric, is that acceptable to you? I apologize.
That's reasonable to me. If that's how you guys want to do the public input, that's fine. You can...
Okay, I sincerely apologize for that. I just I forget myself, and Zoom makes it easy to jump in. I want to give some perspective, as opposed to any kind of rebuttal, on the number of staff. So first of all, I'm going to give you this perspective, not just you, but anyone who's interested in this. A few years ago, I was responsible for presenting a contract to our Hollis Budget Committee. And one of the members who's incredibly bright and very dedicated to supporting the town and the schools was offended by the idea that we were proposing a 16% increase in an hourly rate for one of the categories of custodian. But when I pointed out to him that a 16% increase amounted to 80 cents an hour for a person who is not even earning half the median rate of median income that our two towns share, we forget that percentages are meaningless. If you have one person and then you have another person, that's a 100% increase. The percentage is not an effective way to look at it. And I feel that the percentages that you quoted are, I don't want to use the word misleading, but produce a perspective that's not helpful, that's not accurate. The number of staff that we have at the SAU, including the 2 assistant superintendents. I want to describe the 2 assistant superintendents. One of them, Assistant Superintendent of Student Services. The title itself was changed 2 years ago because the responsibilities are so significant in that position that we all agreed, it was a unanimous vote, that the position needed to become an assistant superintendent. We also took on a second assistant superintendent because of the overwhelming needs of the district with respect to curriculum development and many, many other elements that we've gone over through our school board meetings numerous times. I won't list here. The 2 assistant superintendent positions offer us, the district, something that maybe people forget, and that is no school board can host a meeting, can have a public meeting, a legal meeting, without a superintendent or an assistant superintendent in attendance, which means that the superintendent has to attend every single meeting of every single board, very often also the finance committees and budget committees, et cetera. It is a lunatic kind of burden that our crazy SAU arrangement imposes on the top executive, with the assistant superintendents in addition added to the staff with those titles and with their certifications, with their licenses. They become qualified to run meetings, and that takes an enormous burden off of the overall staff. It's really, really important that you not focus on percentage increases and do focus on the fact that our SAU is almost 100% state, federal mandates. We are held feet to the fire by insurance companies' regulations, and the documentation requirements. So for example, our town continues to ask, why don't we move all of our documentation to digital? We're not allowed to. We have to document, even documents that come in digital form have to be printed out. We are required to keep personnel files on paper and hard copy, as well as in whatever original format they came in, for 7 years at a minimum. Some students' documents have to be retained for 60 years. These things require relentless amounts of photocopying, etc. That doesn't sound like much, but it's a massive amount of work. Our Human Resources Department, if you go back to that slide I was so excited about at the beginning, processes thousands upon thousands of pieces of paper. Our business administrative office processes an incredible volume of paper, let alone, and this is by mandate, not because we're bureaucrats. So the staffing is the minimum that we need. We've looked at other staffing structures at other SAUs that have similar size populations, et cetera, around the state. And we are lean. For the longest time now, for years, our business administrator has been our facilities director. It's been craziness. So I can't emphasize enough how looking at things through the perspective of percentages can really blind you to the actual numbers, which aren't so terrible. If you look at, for example, the 7.9% increase in this budget, it's $140,000. Okay, divide that out over what, roughly 5,000 tax-paying households? It's $28 a household. So the percentage looks terrible. I agree with anyone who doesn't like it. But the actual dollars are not that significant. Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy.
Yeah, I wanted to continue if I could. So thank you, Tammy, for that information. Just for rough numbers, though, instead of percentages, the budget we had at the SAU in 2007 was just over $1 million, about 1.1 million. And for FY22, we're just under 2 million. So that gives you a perspective of where the SAU has gone in terms of spending.
Well, you would be right if nothing else had changed. My dad was an economist and was always on about, all other things being equal. The volume of mandated work, I guess I haven't done a good enough job here on describing it. The volume of mandated work, has easily kept up with double. Easily. There's no fat on this staff. I would understand anyone who wants to vote about this budget and say it's too much of an increase, et cetera, but I can't allow a comment to go by that suggests, and I don't mean against you, Eric, I just mean generally, to suggest that the staffing is excessive. The staff is worked unbelievably hard. We have an immense amount of work that has to be processed, and it's required. For example, Eric, maybe you'll remember a few years ago, there was some legislation out of Concord about, it was something petty about the number of cents per page that towns and districts were allowed to charge the right to know types of requests and such. It looked like such a penny-ante thing. It looked like such a minuscule thing. Why is Concord wasting its time on it? Because it amounts to literally hundreds of thousands of pages a year, hundreds of thousands of photocopied pages that have to be hand-collated. It's all personnel or student privacy matters, so it's highly confidential, requires staff to do it because you can't just hire people out for something that confidential, et cetera. And these kinds of tasks and obligations have ballooned, and that they're not of the district's making, they're not of the local school board's making.
Madam Chair, point of order.
Go ahead, Rob.
I appreciate the need and desire to address issues as they come. However, I think it's important that the board receives input from our community members directly and completely before we start dissecting, or I really think taking the issue by issue is really going to impede our ability to take in information and deliberate and consider it. So I would suggest and respectfully recommend that we allow Mr. Power to deliver his input in its entirety. Issues, we can take notes of certain items of that input and address them after he's completed. I just think this is going to turn into a point counterpoint, and I'm very concerned about it.
Okay, thanks, Rob. That point's well taken, and I agree. Thank you, Tammy, for your clarifications and corrections, and we're going to ask for the duration of the public input to allow Mr. Power to continue.
Thank you. So, as I was saying, we have SAU cost per student at $766 now and going to $813. That's a lot of money when you look at 2,400 students that we expect to have in the SAU next year. And this problem did not occur overnight, and it's not going to be solved overnight. This budget has increased, from 1 million to 2 million using rough numbers. And each year we have to look at what can we do to keep the costs down. Inflation, 7.9%. For example, right now we're in a pandemic, as everyone knows, but inflation has been 1.5%. So if the CPIU has been 1.5% from November 2019 to November 2020, we're asking the SAU is going up at over 5 times the inflation rate. That is really not reasonable for people in the community, because we have a lot of people that are unemployed, people that are underemployed, and it's a difficult time. So, I think we need to be able to have some budget increase, but something that's more reasonable, comparable to inflation. And I do understand that we have some challenges with the New Hampshire retirement system going up substantially, and also with benefits. And so, obviously I'm working on fixing that. That's a big problem on its own that we have to deal with. But I know you can't control that at the SAU, but it is something that you inherit. And when you get more of these expensive costs, you have to kind of look and say, do you really need everybody that you have? And is everybody being paid appropriately? I know there were some comments on that. And I went to the Department of Education website, and they have most superintendents. I think they have all but 4 or 5 superintendents' salaries, and there's 101 salaries. And our superintendent is the 10th highest paid in the state, from what I saw. And so I think he's doing pretty well there. As far as the assistant superintendents, there's only 8 SAUs that actually have any assistant superintendents. And the towns that have them are much bigger than us. We have Derry, Dover, Exeter, Keene, Nashua, Plymouth, and Salem, all very large towns and cities that have the multiple assistant superintendents. So that's something that we have, which is costing a lot of money. So I think we have to really consider that. The budget, this comes up every year, but it's really not sustainable. It's been growing and growing, and it needs to be brought under control. We might need to look at other solutions if this can't be brought under control, because the SAU really is becoming a bigger part of the budget. It's an administrative piece in, over all the districts. And so I did hear some information today that I was not aware of, that there are mandatory raises, but I would recommend that you look at using the low end of the raises if you can, as you deliberate, to try to keep this increase to a smaller level. I heard you had to, by contract, give the assistant superintendent some amount, 2%. Maybe you go with 2% instead of 3% if that's the minimum you can do. I think you should also look at the salary adjustments and sort of match them to inflation, so everybody sort of stays, no one's losing money, but they're staying with inflation during this difficult time. And really kind of look at the 16 positions that we have at the SAU. Do we really need all of them? I'm not privy to all the work that goes on there. I know some of it. I was on the school board previously, but we used to have 9 people doing the work for almost 2,800 students, and we're down below 2,400 students, and we have 16 people now. And so you really have to take a hard look and decide if that's really the right way to spend our tax dollars and do we really need everybody that we have at the SAU? And I know and last piece I wanted to talk about is the unassigned fund balance. I know we're sort of at the low end of that recommendation, but I think you take a look and seeing if you might use a little bit more of that unreserved fund balance to reduce that increase to what the taxpayers are seeing. This is a tough year, and we've inherited some big increases from NHRS. So I think you need to look creatively to try to bring that increase down to something reasonable for the taxpayers, because we're going to be seeing increases in other areas as well in our school districts, in the co-op and Brookline and Hollis. So I think we need to look at all that. And I appreciate everybody's time listening to me. Thank you for understanding my point of view, and please consider myself and all the taxpayers and taxpaying families in Hollis and Brookline when you deliberate, because what you do this year is going to impact what happens next year. It's a snowballing effect. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. We appreciate your input. I'm going to ask one more time before we close out the public hearing for testimony in favor. And one last time for a testimony in opposition. Okay, then with that, I'm going to close the public hearing at 6:59 p.m. and we'll resume to our discussion in the regular meeting. And I need a second to see where we are here. So we're at discussions, and I think, Rob, are you doing a presentation for the facility?
Yeah, I'll let Andy prime the pump for the lease agreement and some of those items. Aaron, if it pleases the school board, the governing board, I'm happy to provide some insights into a revenue model and some things. It's brief, but I think it's important that we share this information because I think it will provoke conversation amongst the members, and I think the feedback we receive in the Hollis district will be very helpful in terms of how we move forward with SAU improvement plans.
I would very much like to see Mr. Mann's presentation. I've seen it offline, and I'd like him to share it with the board if that's okay with the chair.
Yeah, that's fine.
Let's share your screen.
Okay, I'm happy to share my screen, and I'll do a brief presentation if I might.
Sounds good.
Very well. I'll go ahead and get that queued up. Please let me know when you can see this. All right. Oh, I seem to be having issues on my side sharing my screen. Does somebody have a copy that they can navigate for me?
Let me see if I can pull it up.
I'm sorry, I would have checked this out before. I'm not a Zoom super user. Sorry. Try to keep things crisp.
I might be able to, Rob. Hold on one second.
Rob, I have a copy. Is it just not coming up on your own screen?
I have security issues with
well, I can open
it due to corporate policies.
So mine's open. What do you want to do with it?
If you can just share and go into presentation mode, you can navigate and I will present.
So is presentation play? Yeah, okay, we'll see.
Yeah.
I've got a Mac, so I'm hold on 2 seconds. No. Well, now see, 2 seconds. Let me get back to the Zoom. And now the question I have is, am I share screening or what am I doing?
Yeah, Tammy, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, so do I click the button? Ah, I got it. Where is it? Give me just a moment to, yes, I believe this is it. Does this look correct to you, Rob?
There it comes. Can you put it in presentation mode though?
I can in a minute. If you just look at the bottom, do you see version 1.3? Is that the correct version?
Yeah, I think it'll get the point across.
All right, let's try. Tell me if I'm doing it.
I can see it. Great.
Excellent.
So what we wanted to do is bring some details around a revenue model in terms of how we move this proposal forward. And so we wanted to put this short presentation so we can walk through the members. Happy to field any questions. Certainly, if there are questions or comments that come up while I'm doing this, by all means jump in. I want this a bi-directional exchange as much as we can. Thanks, Tammy. Advance, please.
All right, now I have to figure out how to do that, and I beg your pardon. This is, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Tammy, while you're in play mode, you should be able to hit the arrows on your keyboard to move it forward.
To advance.
Oh, thank you. Yes, indeed. Thanks very much, Carol.
Thank you. So we took a bond proposal to our Hollis School District last year. There was a lot of input that we received, and I want to walk through it with everyone. The one item that we did, we had some procedural issues and notification issues that we didn't meet in terms of posting bond hearing notifications, things like that. So there were some technical requirements that weren't met that really confused the message at annual meeting. I think everyone can appreciate that. But the good part, with the takeaways that we had, was that there was general agreement that the renovation of the SAU office of 4 Lund Lane was justified. This is a conversation that we've had for countless years. We as a board, have taken town leaders, stakeholders. We've had tours through that facility. We have built a conversation about the general situation of that property in terms of how it relates to our operations and how it relates to keeping that property relevant to our operations. So we did not get a lot of pushback from a standpoint of justification that, hey, we need to do something around it. The input that we did receive and what we presented was the community and other stakeholders really wanted to hear more detail about the revenue model that distributes the bond cost equitably amongst the districts that comprise SAU41. The other item that we received from our stakeholders was that there is some kind of lease agreement that is put in place that protects the investment for everyone. Right now, we operate the SA41 property without any kind of an agreement long-term. So any significant investment on that property technically is at risk without some sort of an agreement there. You can go in advance, Tammy. Thank you. So the revenue model structure really has 2 components. It is subject to each of the districts, including Hollis. So what we're proposing in terms of charges, we are charging ourselves. So in terms of rent, I want folks to understand that that is an apportioned charge to each district via the SAU budget based on the square footage rate, and it covers 100% of the maintenance costs for 4 Lund Lane. That is the address of the SAU offices. That is how it's been. There is an apportionment. We put those costs into the SAU budget as the budget that Tammy just kind of presented to us. there is a rental component to that that gets apportioned to each of the districts to pay for the upkeep, maintenance, operations. The second component is around the proposed budget to be able to do certain updates to that property. What we're looking into is a direct charge to each of the districts. That combined charge to each of the 3 districts will cover 100% of the costs associated to the bond for improvements of that location at Forlun Lane. The combined rent and bond charges comprise the total annual expenses required to operate, maintain, and cover costs of Forlun Lane, which serves as the administrative offices for SAU41. And to the Hollis School District, they are our tenants as a landlord-tenant kind of relationship. I've been talking with Kelly, our BA administrator, around the idea of being able to do direct charges. And I can talk a little bit of why that's important. To be able to do direct charges, that allows us to have a bigger, more latitude of having conversations of how we split up percentages of bond costs without rolling it into the SAU budget. Why that's important? Because the SAU budget, once it's in that budget, there is a fixed apportionment of 51% Hollis, 51% co-op, 31% Hollis, and 17% Brookline. So as soon as you roll any of those costs, the apportionment is fixed in that context from the point of the rent or rolling bond costs into a rent. So we're looking to that possibly to think about direct charges versus then rolling it into the budget. Now, I would like to also emphasize, this is a proposal, not the proposal. It is something we've looked at a lot of different ways to go about doing this. This is the one that I want to take to the Hollis board and also get their approval and vet it. So this is kind of a proposal that's still in the working stages. So I want to make sure that everyone understands that this isn't the proposal. It's a proposal or a model about how to go forward with this. Thank you. Please.
Rob, can I ask a question while you're on this slide?
Go ahead. Yes, thanks, Tom.
This is Tom Solon.
Yes.
The things that you seem to be addressing with the bond have to do with improvements to the capital property.
Yes.
And that capital property is owned by Hollis.
Yes.
Through the district.
Yes.
It seems rather untraditional that would be like asking tenants to be a co-payer on your mortgage, as opposed to assessing a rent level that is just, you feel is what you've got to get, because Brookline will have no legal equity in ownership of the property. So it's surprising that you would want to apportion bond payment for capital investment to Brookline.
Yeah, we definitely considered that and mulling through that item, Tom. I do talk about that later in the presentation.
Okay.
And we want to stay open to how we can tweak this model to address these type of concerns. I don't have a equity solution at this time, but I will speak to it in part in a later slides. And there's only like 2 or 3 more slides. So
Yeah, the only thing that came to mind when this was first presented to us was if there was a transfer of ownership of the property from the Hollis School District to the Co-op School District, where there is already a structure for shared equity. That might be a route if you feel it's important to distribute bond expenses as well as charging rent.
Right, and we would like to maybe talk about those and then the opportunities around that, Tom. It's just a highly technical aspect that we haven't really entered into with the right experts, and this would be items that we would talk through as part of the lease discussion, and that's surely on the agenda, this item, and how we might be able to find creative solutions to address that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. You can advance. So I want to talk you through the first component, the rent overview. So essentially, the rent itself and how we handle rent, how it's apportioned, I want everyone to understand virtually nothing changes with that. But you're going to say, well, why is the graph going up, and why is it incrementing and positive slope here at 2027? I'll talk you through that a little bit. So the first 5 years, there's some assumptions this model makes, all right, and they're arguable. We could be right, we could be wrong. We can certainly discuss some of these assumptions. The first assumption is that for the first 5 years, essentially, we're not going to need heavy maintenance on the renovations we do to the barn area. We believe there'll be a lot of new aspects to the barn that's not going to degrade any time within 5 years. We would like to just make sure we're handling the modest changes that we're proposing on the farmhouse area, but also address any maintenance on that portion of the I think it's 56 something square feet. So essentially, the way we charge the rent to cover those maintenance costs doesn't change first 5 years. At 2026, you see this step. That step is essentially by year 6, we're saying, well, there might be some things with the added square feet of this improvement that we're going to need to address. So we're going to add the additional square feet to the current square foot rate, today's square foot rate. So that uptick that you see on the graph is just a matter of saying, hey, we're adding I think it's 4,000 square feet or whatever we're getting on the barn. And that's now being added to our calculation to make sure we're maintaining all the square footage now. And then after that, we assumed a 2%, arguably 2%, could be a little less, could be a little more. We're just we're trying to be practical here and saying that annual costs for labor, material costs, things like that we need to do to maintain the property might rise at around 2% a year. So that's why you see that slope increasing after 2027 is really just to keep in pace with general costs of maintenance. So that's what you see. That's really the overview from the standpoint of how we handle rent. It's all apportioned the same way as it always has, and the square footage rate really doesn't change until that 2027, where the overall maintenance cost raises about 2%. And we can change that. We can argue about what that rate is. No problem. But I wanted to put something here that gives folks some idea of where rent might go forward. Now, the only thing I'll add to this slide, and I really want to get done here and really just take some feedback from the group, is that the Hollis board might decide to say, hey, no, we're not going to do it that way. We understand, maintenance costs may increase, but we're going to do it in chunks. Every 3 years we'll review it, and maybe every 3 years we'll adjust it for maintenance increases and so forth. So the board may deem it such that we're going to do it with steps as opposed to a smooth 2%, where we look at it every 3 or 4 years and then adjust as necessary. So I wanted to give an example of how, this model could change from a practical standpoint once we, figure out a model that works for everybody. Please advance, Tammy. So I wanted to give some details of the bond. So I based this model on a 20-year term bond, 1.536 million bond at 3%. I would like to point out, though, that typically quotes from the bond bank are very conservative. We've seen historically that the quotes versus the actual bond that we assume is different, and it's usually less. I mean, it's not unlikely to see a bond such as that come in more like at, maybe 2% or 2.2%. So these are very conservative estimates that were given. I just take those numbers, put it in the model, and run the numbers. So the annual payment of this quoted bond would be $125,865 annually. The first year is a interest payment only year of $38,400. And I'd just like to point out that annual payment of $125,000 comprises principal and interest payments, just like a mortgage or what you pay on a car loan, things like that. Please advance. Thank you. Colors are a little weird here. Sorry about that. But so the bond overview. So the bond contributions are in addition to the rent charges for each district. Hollis would cover 55% of the bond cost. The co-op in Brookline would split a 45% portion of that, covering the entire 100%. In 2022, interest payments, as I stated, are only $38,400. So that's where you see a little knee in the curve in the first year. And in 2023, the full payments of principal and interest would be in full force at that point for the term of 20 years. So this is a graph that shows the stacking. So it shows the percentage of Brookline. It shows the percentage of the co-op, and then it keeps stacking, and then it shows above that is the Hollis portion that gets you to the $125,000 annual bond costs there. So I wanted to just give folks a visual. Please advance, and by all means, interrupt me if you have a question. So this is how the revenue model breaks down per district. So from a rent perspective, as I said, nothing changes. 31 to Hollis, 51 to the co-op, 18, roughly 8 to 17 and change. I just rounded up to 18 for Brookline. This is as it has always been. It is charged through the SAU budget, and there's no changes. That's just we want to keep that very simple and easy. We don't want to meddle with that. The bond as a proposal is 55-45, where the Hollis retains the controlling interest at that level, and we are looking to enter some discussions around how the other districts might be able to contribute to the bond costs. That's just, I wanted to give a simple table that shows those. Please advance if there's no questions. So the bottom line by district, all this shows is a rent plus bond broken out by the separate districts. I would like to point out at the end of the bond term, this goes right back to pure maintenance costs, and we continue on after that, addressing any increases of regular maintenance costs, material costs, so forth. So please advance one more time, and this is thankfully my last slide. So some essentials and an ask of this board. So Hollis cannot champion this proposal alone. It is essential that the other district comprised of SAU41 governing board need to agree that this project is needed, it's worthwhile, and we support it. The Hollis School District is seeking to retain sole ownership and continues to act as the landlord of Forlun Lane with the interests of SAU41 and associated districts at heart. I'd like to point out that if we decide to vacate that property and move into a commercial space, the landlord is looking to make a profit on his property, really doesn't care about the operations of the district or their best interest. They're looking out for their best interest. I would like folks to consider that the Hollis School Board has been running that property for close to 25 years, and we've shown a long history of not wanting to turn that into a revenue source. We just want to run it, cover the costs, and look out for the other districts and help out our administrative staff and give them a reasonable place to work. So our ask tonight is a sense of the board that the Hollis School District should proceed in its efforts for a funding a project for Forlun Lane, a general agreement to move forward in a long-term lease that will be able to address a lot of the specifics that we're really not able to get into tonight, of course, and a general agreement that the nature of the revenue model is appropriate, not necessarily the numbers itself or the percentages, but how we're approaching it is reasonable and malleable and workable. That's really what we're asking tonight, is that kind of feedback. Because I have to say, if we're not all in agreement that this is important, then I suspect, I'm not speaking for the board, I'm only one, but I would suspect that the Hollis board would not be interested in moving this forward if we, as a governing board, we don't agree that, hey, this is important, we need to address it in some way, some form, some fashion. So with that, I'll conclude. Any feedback, any questions, whatever, or Madam Chair, we can just move on in your agenda.
I think it's appropriate if anybody has any questions for Rob regarding this to ask at this time.
Can I interrupt before someone starts? Just a moment. Should I maintain the slideshow, or should I turn this back over to Bob Thompson?
I don't think we need the slideshow up, Tammy. I think unless Rob disagrees, you can stop share.
Only if there's questions relating to specifics of the content.
All right, I'm happy to keep. I just didn't know what people want. Go ahead.
This is Ken. Can you just do a quick reminder and high level of why we're looking to raise and do a renovation? I'm Not sure I remember the full reasoning of why we're
Sure,
pursuing this.
sure. So, and Andy, jump in if need be. But for several years, we've had a lot of storage space issues with documents that we need to store on site and nearby. That is not the primary reason. As we know, positions and roles have increased over the 25 years that we've operated the property. And I have to say, as long as I've been on the board, the property has been a concern for a long time. As we've gotten, over the past recent several years, we've gotten input, talking to the superintendent and such in terms of the space that we have currently versus the space that is needed. So it's been a growing issue over many years, and we've been trying to address it over many years. We've done a lot of facility studies. We've looked at other locations and their price points. Heck, this has been an issue that I know the SAU board was looking at back in 2010. I know we did one of the first investigations on it, and should we move, should we not move? So this is really to address and put forward a growing need and to provide, and we're actually trying to keep also the property relevant to our operations. It's getting more and more difficult to do that. I hope that—
Rob, if I may add a few details. I was tasked with presenting the proposal for this for a public forum last spring, right before COVID hit. It was right just at the outset. I want to point out that we have 17 staff members in this 100-plus-year-old building, to the point that we've got a storage facility unit outside near the field, just beyond the parking lot, to hold all kinds of materials in order to make space for the last office space. We have people with desks at the top of the stairs landings. We have 3 people sharing an old 100-plus-year-old bedroom as an office. We have an office that has only one exit from the building. People have to walk through people's offices to get to the bathrooms. There are 2 bathrooms for 17 people, and they're they're very old. The facilities aren't 100 years old in the bathrooms, but they're 50 years old at least. We don't have any storage at all in the SAU for the voluminous amounts of work that has to be carried out and retained. We have the conference room has a conference table that will hold about 8 people, but only if you're up against the wall and the chairs. There's very little space for any confidential meetings. The walls are paper thin, and most of the meetings that go on in this building have strong confidentiality components to them. There's almost no place to put any further digital equipment, and we need to expand to keep up with how electronics are used for communications and documentation, et cetera. So we're literally being mandated out of this footprint. The proposal that we put together for the public that just couldn't cross the finish line because of a technicality and frankly because of COVID showed really substantially how the use currently, they store stuff in the bathtub of one of the old bathrooms in this current building. There's no closets, there's nothing. It's extremely difficult to function there.
Well, it's essentially like taking your house and we put 13 or 15 people in it as to work in. And so that house has the same bathrooms that your houses have. It's not a commercial space. You can literally take a bubble bath if you like at work in the SAU building. So even the bathrooms are really not appropriate for a professional space. So these are some of the things that are built into the plan. We do have material that goes into a lot more detail. I'm happy to share with everyone and anyone who wants to see more detail. So I hope that I hope that answers the question. I don't know if we're trying to be complete here, but also trying not to be too verbose.
No, I just needed the high level. I appreciate that. I just was trying to understand the rationale just for the public to hear again. And then it sounds as if this is not just a focus on the farmhouse, and we're going to renovate the actual unit itself then too, correct?
Yes, the barn, which is completely not used right now. And it has vital square footage. It can provide vital square footage that we know that the administration can use. And storage space in the basement will have a significant amount of storage space appropriate for securing and maintaining the documents that are required by RSA.
So Rob, my only thought is in terms of just getting a sense of the board, I think that it's, you know, it's a project that needs to be done. I think as we move forward, and this is me really speaking also on behalf of our Brookline board, is just, you know, a simplified understanding of how the cost would work. I think it's when you talk about, kind of like alluding to what Tom said, when you talk about paying for a bond for a project in Hollis, the nuance of that and how we, you know, support that to our voters is tricky. And I don't know if, you know, there's, you know, graphs that can show with just rent versus the combination versus, and I don't know if, you know, it can be customized per district, you know, but just having a look at all the models and a clear understanding at some point so that we can decide on as succinct a process as possible that we could bring forward.
Yeah, we're happy to, you know, look into those opportunities, but at this point we need to, we're really at a go no go because we have spent tons of time and effort and years, quite frankly, doing the research, doing the communication, doing the studies and things like that. So we're really just need to know, do we go forward or do we stop? I mean, I want it, I guess what I'm asking for, Aaron, is I want to hear people in opposition, if there are any, that says this is outlandish, there's this problem I don't like, that problem I don't like, or that issue I don't like. We want to provoke a conversation that can we build this and improve the model that works for all stakeholders so we can move forward, or this is a no-go because it's a ton of work. So we want to make sure that, you know, that if we go forward, that we go forward together. We do not want to drag anyone along.
So Rob, I've been trying to interrupt for quite a while. This is Liz
Sure.
Brown. I have some questions.
Sure,
So starting with the first question is, you discuss a long-term lease. What is the term of the lease you're willing to offer the SAU at this point?
Well, we would be considering certainly a lease that covers the length of the bond as a start. So a lot of the financial and budget committee stakeholders have provided that input because they don't want to, they want some sort of an agreement in place. So we don't go down this road and, you know, get a bond in place and then 2 years later, it's, you know, we decide to vacate and leave while we still have a bond to pay for. So
I think the other districts that you're asking to pay for this bond have got an equal concern, because if we only have a lease that lasts through the length of the bond, we are all paying for Hollis to seriously improve this. This building isn't even a building. And Hollis has allowed it to run down to this capacity. And you are well aware that you just pointed out has been going on for an advance of 10 years and Hollis has done nothing to repair it. and it is their property. So now they're asking the other districts to basically pay the cost of the bond through the bond period, but at the end of the bond period, we're not going to be guaranteed a long-term lease. A lease the length of the bond is going to be severely too short and is going to jeopardize all of the other districts you're asking to pay into this.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, Liz. And I think what we would be interested in is a term that goes beyond that.
But what you've been basically telling us is that we need to take it or leave it approach at the end of this meeting tonight.
No,
You
that's not the
presented
case.
your slides and you've asked for feedback, and now it's clear you don't want the feedback.
No, that's not true. I want a conversation, Liz.
And I'm trying to ask some questions.
Well, hold on. You started by telling us that we're derelict of not improving the building. I'm telling you, we've only charged to maintain the building. Improving and maintaining are two very different things. We are happy to talk about and enter into a conversation about the term. If it's agreeable to have it for the term of the bond, we can talk about that. If the conversation turns that we want it 10 years beyond the bond term, we're open to that. We are open to hearing from you, but please don't tell us we've been derelict in handling this building. We're trying to address it.
I do want to point out that we retain the rent as a building maintenance trust and expend it almost completely, not necessarily a year at a time, but we've committed significant maintenance and renovation to the existing house to keep it intact and structurally sound and functioning as best it can. So it hasn't been allowed to run down like, say, the White Building, the Farley Building. It's just inadequate in size and scale for the current and future operations.
But it is a resource and an asset of the Hollis School District. And beyond the term of the lease, it has no value to the other districts.
That's perfectly fine. I just take issue with the idea that it's become derelict. It's not at all. It's perfectly sound. It's just inadequate for...
Well, I think your point was exactly right. I don't even think for the purposes it's being used for, is it appropriate? It's probably not appropriate to store stuff in the tub, and it's probably not appropriate to be having meetings in rooms that probably violate fire code.
They do not violate fire code. I have to interrupt. I'm so sorry, Liz. I beg your pardon.
In that conference room pretty darn tight. It would be
I understand, but the fire chief,
So,
etc. It's
the concern that I see is trying to transfer the cost of a bond onto districts who have no ownership interest in the property. And thereby, those other districts are going to ultimately increase the value of the property. And at the end of that, we may, if we don't have a lease that's going to give us the right to stay there longer at a set amount of rent, we run the chance that we're going to basically pay the bonded amount, improve the property, and now be subject to increased cost for rent for the property because we've improved it and we've paid for it. Sounds like a horrible business decision from the aspect of the co-op. The other thing is, I think we're sitting at a pivotal year for commercial real estate. The very idea of spending $1.5 million on that piece of real estate in Hollis right now seems like a terrible idea when we know that the commercial market in the area where we are is on the substantial decline. We probably would be able to get rental space in a third-party space cheaper than the spending the $1.5 million to renovate that space, and maybe more appropriate space, because you're going to have to make a fairly significant change of that property and displace the SAU staff for a considerable amount of time in order to make that workable. And you're still looking at an old farmhouse that isn't well insulated, as your primary office facility for, I think Tammy used the number, how many $1 million business that we're operating out of a, an old farmhouse?
Yeah, $51 million business. So I'm not sure that the board members
Probably
have.
looking at a more suitable commercial site that very well may come available in Hollis at a commercially more reasonable terms should be something that we look at. I don't see a good reason to go forward with this right now. As Mr. Power pointed out, there are people in our community who are suffering, and any sort of adding to their plate right now of a significant financial burden, it's just not good timing. And we are really at a roads in the economy, and I think we need to wait to see how things shake out, and we may find the perfect space to run the SAU at a much better cost.
I think that's great feedback, Liz. And I can tell you, based on the research that we did on commercial properties, of course, pre-COVID, the costs of relocating to a commercial space is on par and long-term more expensive. But to your point, COVID may change that data point, at least temporarily. I know that talking to former board members, the reason why the Hollis School Board got 4 Lund Lane is because prior to that, they were in a commercial space and they were tired of dealing with, that situation. So they had 4 Lund Lane as a property and sold it to the Hollis School Board for, I think, $1. And because they wanted to house the SAU administration under a district-owned property. Now, certainly if we continue our conversations around this, and certainly considering your input, if it makes sense to change that and go out and get commercial space, I think that's certainly on the table. I want to remain agnostic here to options. All I can tell you is that we've looked at this a lot before we even brought this forward. So a lot of the items that you're bringing forward, we have looked into. But
We studied, for example, the property that was Harvest Market. We spoke to the owner there, et cetera, and that was going to be a $10 per square foot rental without any fix-up costs, meaning any outfitting the building into, usable for something other than at the grocery store. We also looked at, when it was for sale, the manufacturing property at the end of South Merrimack on the other side of the wetlands there. That was for sale for a short time, and that was, or a while anyway, and that was 1.3 million, if I remember right. And again, it's a manufacturing facility, so that didn't include any of the fix-up costs, the fit-up costs, not fix-up, fit-up costs. We looked, for example, at the property across from the post office, that very handsome arrangement there, and again, very, very expensive and completely unsuitable to the SAU's needs. And it was very difficult to find square footage elsewhere in Hollis or Brookline that we could identify just in our assessments that had the square footage and the utility that came in at a cost that was less than a commercial rate of about $13 a square foot if it's already outfitted for offices. So that was one of the reasons that drove us back to looking at a property renovation rather than a move.
This is Tom speaking. I think the challenge that you have in the model that you're using is you're not factoring into it the requested contribution to the bond, which is effectively increased rent to everyone but Hollis. If you look at that graph that shows the combined input of rent and
is this it?
Yeah, that one, the one you just passed by.
This one?
That one? Yeah.
Okay.
the one you keep flipping by.
I didn't slip past it. It seems to be playing. Go ahead.
But the point is that to the co-op and the Brookline School District, and particularly to Brookline residents who don't benefit from the Hollis School District, all the money paid towards the bond is effectively rent for that 20-year period, after which the rent drops back down, but they've been paying that high level of rent. If your assumption that it is essential that Hollis School District maintain sole ownership is a ground rule for moving forward, then I recommend that you reconstruct the model that shows only the Hollis School District paying the bond, and then identify what the rent needs to be to allow that to happen. Because that, to me, is the only way you're going to get support, is that if you want to retain ownership as a Hollis School District, then the other school districts are merely tenants, and they have to evaluate their annual cost compared to renting elsewhere. 20 years is a long time in the context of how our two communities have been discussing growth as far as being shared school districts. I'm suspecting and maybe hoping that it could continue much longer than that. But to Liz's point, I think that you'd have to put at least a 50-year lease in place to make it worthwhile for the other school districts to be investing in the equity of the property. And I think that proposing that there be an assurance of 50 years of continued relationship with Hollis and Brookline is going to be a tough sell.
That's great input, Tom.
Can I share input as well?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I don't want to get into solving issues right now. I'm happy to, happy to take the input. We can certainly convert that into a square footage cost. I do have some very budgetary numbers. It would run between 12 and I think $14 or $15 a square foot if you roll in the just the rent and bond costs into a square footage cost. But we can certainly.
Yeah, I think you have to illustrate it that way, so that it could well be that you're making a case that even with that combined cost, it's still a valuable place to be a tenant. But that's the viewpoint that needs to be enumerated.
No, it's great input. Thank you.
Brooke, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight, and correct me if this is inaccurate, Rob. My perception is that one of the challenges that the Hollis district is up against is the fact that historically the district has charged such a low rent that effectively the property has been, I guess, to my perception, a shared asset across the districts because the rent is so much beneath market value, and that it really is only covering the maintenance. So it hasn't been a revenue source historically to the Hollis School District. And so now this look at rent increases to cover the bond seems like such a jump, but that really the rent that's been charged is much below market value of rents that could be acquired.
Yeah, I mean, historically, the rent charge has been virtually nothing. It works out to like $2 a square foot, where current commercial spaces are between $12 and $15 a square foot. So we've been operating that way for many years. So that's true.
But it's not a shared asset, because ultimately, at the end of the day, the property can be sold for a significant amount of money, and that money would not go to anyone but the Hollis School District.
As it's currently structured, that's correct. So maybe that's a aspect we look into, or we can also take the feedback from this and this governing board that says, hey, it's not the time. Status quo for now. You know, we can take that input as well. We want to be agnostic. We're trying to address a problem that works for the districts, and also, you know, as board members here, we have a stake in making sure our administrators have a decent place to work, that they're in a space that that meets their needs and so forth. So if this is a possible solution to that issue, great. If it's not, we will cease. We will stop our efforts.
So Rob, I feel like it might be a good idea for each of the boards for their next meeting to include this as a board level discussion, because I feel like that could be productive in providing information that, you know, is really a collective sense of each individual board back to you, rather than in this forum, and just allow for that discussion.
Absolutely, and I want to close. I know that you have plenty of other things to talk about. I think we ran quite long. I know it's a complicated conversation that we're having. Really appreciate the feedback. I do want to point out, this is not a take it or leave it ultimatum. This is a first step of a conversation to see if we can figure out and improve on this or build something else that works so we can address the issues. If not, then we can just leave it alone. But please, if you have feedback, please consider it. Please provide it, and we can go from there. Thank you, Erin. Really appreciate the time and the feedback.
Thanks everybody. Do we want to discuss the memo, Andy, at this point?
Well, I would like to discuss the memo, because no matter whether Hollis decides to go forward, no matter what the SAU board decides, I think we should take step one, which is acknowledging that there's a conflict that exists naturally, because as the superintendent of all 4 districts, there's a conflict if we were going to enter a lease. As the board chair of Hollis and a member of the SAU board, Rob Mann has a conflict, and so will the next board chair. The co-op board chair has a conflict when they enter the lease. So what we're looking for is to allow the attorneys to create a document, and Tom Clausen would represent the Hollis School District, and Jim O'Shaughnessy would represent the SAU board, and just confirm that a conflict exists, but recognize it. And once that's done, then if you decide as an SAU board and all the other boards that you want to move forward, you've taken that step. That step will exist whether you decide to move forward this year, next year, at some point in the future. All I'm looking for tonight during deliberations is that the SAU board allows Erin to sign the document that would allow the 2 attorneys to have a conversation around this conflict and make it a known conflict. So then we could start to discuss a lease. Now, what's going to be in that lease, we have a long way to go. So that's where I am with the conflict of interest memo, which we did provide at each of the board meetings, so people could at least have multiple opportunities to review that. And I'd be happy to try to answer any questions.
We can move right on to the motion for this memo, since deliberations are next, if there aren't any specific questions for Andy. Does that make sense? So I guess the motion, since I don't have the benefit of Dawn's outline for this one, the motion would be to allow the governing board chair to sign an acknowledgement of the conflict of interest regarding potential SAU lease of 4 Lunge Lane. Does that sound? Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we got a second. So I'll go ahead and do the roll call. Erin, aye. Brooke?
Aye.
Liz?
Aye.
Tammy?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Becky?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Rob?
I abstain.
Carol? Oh, should I? Carol?
Carol Roy, aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Krista?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
I would like to change my vote to abstain as well. So Erin abstain. Okay. Now moving on in deliberations. We have some policy motion deliberations to do. Amy, do you want to cover the policies, or would you rather I do it?
No, I'm happy to do it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So should I just start with the motion and then discussion?
Yeah.
Okay. So motion to accept the third reading and adopt policy EHAA, computer security, email, internet communications as amended.
So moved.
Second.
So this was discussed at length at the last meeting. The changes have been highlighted. The main change was just to make all of the headers consistent with the title SAU41 Governing Board Policy.
Do we have any further discussion for EHAA? Okay, we'll bring it to a vote. Erin, aye. Brooke?
Aye.
Liz?
Liz, aye.
Tammy?
Tammy, aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Becky?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Rob?
Rob, aye.
Carol?
Carol, aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Krista?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
Do we remember the order, or should I keep doing the call? Any thoughts on that real quick?
I think the most efficient
I
is
don't
for you to still
remember
doing
it.
roll call.
Okay, I'll do roll call. Just
You don't
wanna
want to
make
miss
sure.
anybody.
I don't like hearing my own voice all over and over again, but whatever. That's fine. Okay, CBI. Go ahead, Amy.
Okay, so motion to accept the second reading, waive the third, and adopt policy CBI superintendent evaluation as amended.
Second.
So moved.
So again, the changes here are all what we had discussed at the prior meeting. The consistent header, capitalizing board, and removing SAU41, SAU governing, and then clarifying between school district and SAU41 district, and also the date change that was discussed in the third paragraph.
Okay, if there's no further discussion on CBI, we'll vote. Erin, aye. Brooke?
Brooke, aye.
Liz?
Aye.
Tammy?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Becky?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Rob?
Rob, aye.
Carol?
Carol, aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Krista?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
Thank you. Now CBIR, Amy?
Motion to accept the second reading of CBIR instructions for superintendent performance review process school district boards as amended, waive the third reading and adopt.
Second.
So again, changes have highlighted, and it was mainly just clarifying school district.
Okay, with no further discussion, we'll go ahead and vote. Erin, aye. Brooke?
Aye.
Liz?
Aye.
Tammy?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Becky?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Rob?
Rob, aye.
Carol?
Carol, aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Krista?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
All right. That passes. And was that it, CBIR? Was that the last one, Amy?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So the final deliberation is to see what action the board will take regarding the operating budget. So I'm looking for a motion, unless anyone is looking to wait. Is it just a motion to approve the FY22 budget in the total amount of, what was the total amount? I didn't write that down.
Oh, hold on.
One sec.
$1,953,257.
Go ahead. That's right.
Okay.
So moved.
Great. Can anyone second?
Second.
Thank you. Erin, aye.
No, wait,
Wait,
we have to have
sorry.
discussion.
Yes.
Mr. Power had brought up several items that I wanted to add some data feedback to, actual, not just opinion. When we compare superintendent salaries, assistant superintendent salaries, et cetera, or even the existence of the positions like assistant superintendent by simply looking at the Department of Education salaries list, what you can't see there is how those districts are constructed. So for example, in Bedford, they have no budget committee. A 5-member school board runs the entire school district for all of Bedford without other input. The superintendent has one board, one budget, et cetera, to deal with. In Hollis, we have not only the 2 towns and an SAU, but we also have the co-op on top of that. So all of our staff are required to do 4 jobs, the same job for 4 districts, including, the SAU itself. So it's a little bit, it's not even a little bit, it's quite a bit of apples to oranges unless you know that what you're looking at is the same workload. And to say that, for example, Superintendent Corey's salary is a top 10 of the state, it doesn't look at what his equivalent workload is. And in terms of the number of assistant superintendents, there is no superintendent in the state who has to do as many meetings as our superintendent, whether it's Andy or anybody else, but because of the structure of our SAU and the co-op. Another point,
Careful
Mr.
what you say there, Tammy.
No, but it's true.
Because,
however, who else is
because
structured like we
there
are?
are districts that have, there are co-op districts that have 7 school districts in them. So he does a lot of work, but don't speak in such
Well, there is
absolutes.
Conval, that's true. I beg your pardon. So there, Eric brought up another point. He was pointing out the possibility of not going for the 3% increase for our 2 assistant superintendents. We looked at that very closely with respect to what the math impact would be. If you look at the packet, at those slides, you'll see on one of the budget pages in tiny print, unfortunately, that a 1% change in the budget, over the entire budget, is equal to $17,800. So a 1% shift in just those 2 salaries is only a few $100s. It's not a significant change in savings to the taxpayers. However, it is a significant reduction in the increase to the individuals that would lose that 1%. And also, the last thing that Mr. Power brought up that I have some information on, he talked about using more of the unassigned fund balance than the recommended 7 to 10% range. So for example, spending out of that and going below the 7% range. the budget subcommittee, which again includes a member of the Brookline Finance Committee, the Co-op Budcom, and the Hollis Budcom, as well as board members from the districts, flatly refused to do that on the basis of prudent, just a prudence with maintaining a safety net in that unassigned fund balance. Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. Is there any further discussion?
I have a couple of comments, if it's convenient.
Go ahead, Tom.
Similar to the comments that Tammy made, I just want to correct what may be some misunderstandings. There seems to be this belief that our assistant superintendents are new created positions, and as Tammy alluded to, we used to have a director of student services and a director of curriculum. Over time, both of those roles have been converted and retitled as assistant superintendents. In many cases, the responsibilities just switched over, but added responsibilities were brought in primarily, as Tammy noted, to cover the legal requirement of having a person of certain qualifications and title to run a board meeting. So it isn't just a thing of convenience, it is to some degree of necessity, but it's also recognition of the fact that we have staff that were credentialed and capable of having the superintendent portion of their title, but they were not added positions, they were not added personnel. Another big thing that keeps coming up is the use of CPI as a good metric for looking at salary changes and budget changes, where 92% of the SAU budget is salaries and benefits. There's a much more appropriate index, which is called the ECI. It is the Employment Cost Index, and it's available in the same website and Department of Labor area as CPI is. But where CPI talks about the cost of buying a fixed basket of goods, the Employment Cost Index is a metric of the cost of salary and benefits. They put it both ways, and for those same time frames that CPI was quoted, depending on which version of the ECI you use, that was up approximately 40%. So when you look at the rise in the SAU budget and measure it based on the cost of salaries, it's not as out of line as people would tend to think. And then add on to that the fact that in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire is not singled out for any of these indexes, NHRS is up 107 and 270% over that same time frame for the categories of employees that we have that get NHRS. And our healthcare has gone up by, I don't have the exact number, but a significant number. So if you look at how our budgets have increased over the period of time relative to employee compensation costs, I would suspect that we have been below the metric, not above it as has been suggested. So although I think that the cost of education is kind of way out of line, I think that the SAU's office and the districts as a whole have done a really good job of working with the hand they've been dealt. I would suggest that it's probably appropriate time for the SAU board to reconvene a working group to look at health benefit options for the SAU. We tend to do everything as a group, and we did this, I don't know, it's got to be going on to probably close to 10 years ago now. Gina, do you remember what the date was when we left?
That's right.
Yeah, because you were a teacher then. But there
Yeah, I
are
was
new
on that
options.
committee with you, Tom, and that's got to be a minimum of 8 years ago.
Yeah.
It was
So
before I
I
was on the
think
board,
that,
and that was 7 years ago. Yeah.
if we want to look at ways of reducing costs overall, it's not to take little chunks here and there. It's going to be systemic. And I think that healthcare is one of the areas where there may be an opportunity to ratchet things again, not just for the SAU, but for the overall district. So I don't know if it's anything you want to do at this meeting or if it even requires board approval, but I would suggest having an SAU-wide benefits working group reconvened.
Yeah, I would.
Won't stop.
I think that's a worthwhile endeavor, Tom. When I do, just to support some of your points, I was doing some quick calculations. When you look at the NHRS increases combined with the insurance and the GMR guidance that we received, just alone, that is taking 52% of the increases of the $143,303 that Tammy covered. So I would like you to point out that 52% or $75,144 is attributed just to the NHRS and the insurance increases. So you have a majority of the overall increases that are really commanded by things that we don't really control. And to rake back that by taking, to your point, little bits and pieces here and there as it pertains to personnel and salaries is a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It doesn't really buy us much, but it certainly impacts our operations significantly.
Yeah, Rob, I was going to say something relatively similar. We're talking about a roughly 150K cost growth, 75K of which is that on nothing we can do. It's kind of sunk, and another 75K around salary and taxes, 75K on roughly a $1.9 million budget. To me, I appreciate the feedback, and I do think it's worth looking at health insurance. I think looking at the org structure always a good thing, and thought process too. But from an overall budget standpoint, I think talking about 75K on a $1.9 million budget from a cost growth, I'm fully comfortable with this tonight with those added actions that we've discussed this evening.
Thank you, everyone. Is there any further discussion? Okay, I think we're ready to vote. Erin, aye. Brooke? Did we lose her? Oh, no.
Sorry, did that not come through? I said aye.
I'm sorry. Liz?
Aye.
Tammy?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Becky?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Rob?
Rob, aye.
Carol?
Carol, aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Krista?
Krista, aye.
Beth? Yeah, Beth.
Beth, aye.
It was the last one. I got so excited. Okay, motion passes. That is our final deliberation. Krista, do you want to report out? It is 8:16.
I know, I was just gonna say, if you just finished like just a little bit faster, you could have been right on time. I was looking right at it. No, very honestly, there was a lot of really good discussion. A lot was included in this meeting today, and yet we finished on time and did a good job. I think the budget presentation was outstanding, and thank you to everyone who participated in that. But thank you, Tammy, for presenting it, because that's always tricky, and it was very well done. So thank you.
Thanks, Krista. And we do not have a non-public. Is that right, Andy?
That's correct.
Great. So looking for the last motion.
So moved.
Second.
One more time. Erin, aye. Brooke?
Aye.
Liz?
Aye.
Tammy?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Becky?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Rob?
I gotta find this mute button faster. Rob, aye.
Carol?
Carol, aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Cindy?
Aye.
Krista?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. The meeting's adjourned.